everybody, and welcome back to Chapter Tactics, episode number 209. I am your host, Magikarp Usefly, also known as Matt. And in this podcast, we talk about tactics and strategies to help out both new and veteran players alike. With me today, we have the very, very handsome Adameki.
Hey, everybody. How are y'all doing today?
That's a good intro. And on top of that, not only do we have Demeki, we also have the very, very beautiful Skari.
Why, hello. And you can find me, you know where. Wink, wink.
That sounds so mysterious.
I'm intrigued.
Yes.
Is it an 800 number?
Jesus.
It is with the ever-changing winds of today's topic.
Yeah, which is an ever-changing meta. Ooh.
Oh.
So, before we start off, I just want to say that John P. cannot be joining us here today because he is not here. He is in Florida, doing Florida man stuff, trying to save the world, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I don't know what he's doing in Florida, actually. I have no idea. I think it was just to celebrate the 4th of July weekend, but I hope that everybody that is listening to this podcast had a great weekend, had a good time, hung out, spent some time with some family, and if you do not celebrate the 4th of July, I still hope that you had a great weekend. Now, this episode, we are talking about how to prepare for an ever-changing meta. We all play Warhammer, and we all know that every once in a while, GW comes in like a wrecking ball and just completely demolishes everything that we know of in this game. And so we're going to be talking about how to prepare for that along with our guest Skari here. But first, before we go into that, I think that Demeki has some knowledge that he wants to drop on us with today's Did You Know?
I'm winging it. I'm just using straight off the top of my head knowledge that I have accumulated so far about Commander Farsight. So, Commander Farsight, did you know that he's the hero of Yorla, and he is the protege of Commander Puretide? He was taught to use the terrain against his foes, and the sword that his battlesuit carries is actually what is keeping him alive.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
So he's like Iron Man, but a sword.
Yeah. I mean, that's about all I know so far. I do have the book I'm looking for, or the second book. I'm looking forward to reading it. But I know some other things, but like I've got like a plethora of information about Commander Farsight in my head, and I don't know what's true, what's false. Like I think I've read at some point one of the things that like I guess enlightened him was like he lost all of his ethereals during a battle, and that's kind of like when he was like, well, maybe I should do my own thing. Maybe it's not all about this greater good stuff, and I'll start my own enclaves. So, yeah.
Do you know a lot about?
Yeah, his like brainwashing powers deactivated, and then he's like, I don't need to follow you. I can do my own thing.
Yeah, he was like, hey, I can go get my own beer. I can go do my own stuff. I'm an adult.
I'm an adult now.
All of Tao's lore, every time that I hear about it, it sounds more and more in line with how I feel like I would live my life if I was living in the 41st millennia.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I think I would live the Tao way. I definitely think so.
Anyways, on to some stuff to get excited about.
Yes.
So, Age of Sigmar 3.0 launched.
It's
officially.
here.
It is here. If you haven't gotten your Dominion box yet, good luck. Hopefully that you can still get them, but we have gotten our Dominion box.
With the other one on the way.
Yeah, we got some Stormcast Eternals and some, what is it, Uruks?
Uruks
that we're building up right now, so hopefully you guys get your chance in playing in some Age of Sigmar. If you are already running a Chaos Army, then you're already there. So go ahead and play it out. It's I know that Skari, you've been playing a lot of Age of Sigmar. What do you think about it so far with 3.0?
I've played a few games of 3.0. I really like it. It's very similar to 40K 9th edition in like scoring. right? So the game's completely different, but I'm a huge fan of their mission system. Like the way they have the secondaries and the primary scoring, the way you have to build like a mission into like your list building. And it's like a really tactical like game when it comes to like scoring points, and I really like that aspect of it because you have to think throughout the whole game. You have to pick the right secondaries at the right time. You can't double up on them throughout the game, so it's different, and it's a good thinker. Like you'll enjoy it if you haven't tried it yet.
You know, the way that you're telling me about the secondaries, it kind of reminds me of how Necrons play with their
The dynasty,
their dynasties or whatever.
Yeah.
Is it like the same thing?
Protocols, yeah.
Yeah. Is it like the same thing?
Well, you don't get to choose them either or, but there's a list of like, 7 or 8 secondaries in the GT mission pack, and there's like 6 in the regular pack. You have a 5-turn game, and then the beginning of your player turn, you basically declare, I'm going to try and do this.
Oh.
And by the end of your player turn, you have to try and do it, but you can't repeat any of that list. So one of them is like, have the most models in the middle of the table, like literally like an Oath of Moment style thing. And then you pick that, and then you go, okay, so I scored my points or I didn't. Another one is, this turn I'm going to try kill your warlord, right? And you either do or you don't in that turn, right? I'm going to try and kill something that's in my deployment zone, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to try kill something in your deployment zone, right? And so you have to you need to be able to pick multiple ones throughout the game, right? Because you can't just pick the same one over and over. And it makes it very interesting.
So it's kind of like match play from 8th, right, with the cards, but instead of it being random,
Maelstrom of War.
instead of it being randomized with cards, you actually get to pick. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, and it's cool because you can set it up and then pick it for the next time, and you can do stuff like, I'm gonna try kill your warlord, and then your opponent's like, I'm gonna declare my my mightiest hour for my warlord, so he's harder to kill this turn, that sort of thing. So they can try and stifle you and things like that. It's neat.
Now, do you think that 3.0 can be on the same level as 40K when it comes to being competitive?
I think the competitive AOS community is quite competitive. I think what is prevalent is that there's a lot more direct rock, paper, scissors in Age of Sigmar. Right? So if you build a list that's really good, again, to do damage or that has good armor or whatever, there's a list out there that does only mortal wounds and would murder your army.
Oh, okay.
Right? You want to build a super spell heavy army, there's an army out there that's just going to shut down your spells, right? So there's very much a rock, paper, scissors element to it that I find a lot more than in 40K.
Yeah, because 40K is you have to be able to deal with everything, and even though there is kind of rock, paper, scissors, you could still get by with it, and it's fine.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So we have that. Also, new Sheridan coming in soon.
Yeah, boy.
That's going to be exciting. You got the new Be'lakor rules. You also got some, I believe there's Chaos Space Marine rules in there.
Yeah.
So that's going to be cool. That's coming out. Also, some tournaments that are still happening. Upcoming this weekend, Dice Hammer. That's happening in California.
Bricky will be there.
Yes, Bricky will be there. And also, Lone Star Open tickets are still on sale. So if you want to go check that out, and head on over to Dallas, Texas, and play some Warhammer. Pew pew. You could do so as well.
That's actually this month too. It's at the end of the month.
Yep. Now I think that we have gone over some stuff that segue alert. All right, here we go. Let's get on to the main topic of this podcast. But before we do that, this show is brought to you by FrontlineGaming.org, where you can get amazing game mats for not just your 40K games, but also any tabletop game out there. Purchase miniatures at a discount and join some of the largest 40K events in the industry. They also have the largest 40K podcasting network in the business, with shows like Signals from the Frontline, Chapter Tactics, which you're listening to right now, 40K Game Changers, 40K Stat Center, Grim After Dark, and so much more. That's frontlinegaming.org, or you can click on the link in the description of this podcast and on everywhere that you can get us in social media goodie forms in your ear holes and stuff, all you Zoomers out there with your different technology thingies.
Your Fache books and tweeters.
Yeah, your audio book stuff, iTunes and whatever. The kids, you're playing it on your Zunes and you're All right, so today's topic, we're talking about how to prepare for an ever-changing meta. Got some got a little line for you guys. If you guys want to close your eyes as I whisper sweet nothings into your ears. So no army is safe when it comes to the GW Nerf hammer, and no army is complete without their buff hammer either. So how do you keep your army ready for the upcoming changes, and how do you deal with getting your army nerfed or buffed? Now, Scary, I know that you recently are you were dealt a little bit of a nerf with your Drukhari from GW, nerfing them a little bit with your liquefiers and all that nonsense. How does it feel coming from a recently nerfed army, and comparatively to how it felt in 8th edition when you would get nerfed or buffed?
Well, it's a funny question you may ask, because I didn't really use the liquefier guns. I was so it's not my style of gameplay, so I didn't really feel the nerf at all. And I feel that's one of the strengths, is I tend to play stuff that's counter meta. Then when it does get nerfed, it doesn't affect my way that I've been learning how to play the match. I know a lot of people out there are feeling the nerf of the liquefier guns, but to be honest, Dark Eldar are still incredibly strong. So it doesn't really change the faction as a whole. It just changed like a specific build that was seen over and over and over in competitive play.
Yeah. And I think that's the same thing that's happening with like AdMech, because recently AdMech got their FAQ where they changed the sterilizer so then they can no longer just keep coming in and out without any interaction at all. So that's good. That's good. I honestly, I feel like that GW is doing a really good job with their nerfs and buffs. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I just I'm just more so curious as to how they didn't find some of this stuff during playtesting, because like that's the QA portion, at least I think it is, for these books.
All you have to do is give a book to like a competitive gaming team or something like that, and they will find everything in that book that is abusable. And then you just go, okay, thank you. And then go, we should probably address this before we release it. But a lot of the times, like playtesters, I'm not a playtester. I don't really like know much about the playtesting process. What I do know is that they sort of like, a lot of the times playtesters don't have a lot of time to work with specific rules. And a lot of the times the rules that they get aren't necessarily in like a group thing. They send them like tidbits individually and not combined. So they're working with individual mechanics more than like with the whole thing throughout the process a lot of the time.
Yeah, and like, I think that's because you have your printable codexes, right?
Yeah.
So they can't really send you the finished codex. I guess like maybe they could send you like a binder and like some printed paper of it, but
all I'm picturing is a dude sitting at a table, like they're all on a conference table, right? A whole bunch of people, and a guy goes, "Oh, I have an idea," and he writes it down on a Post-it note, and then they just pass that around. They're like, "Here's this new rule, test this out."
What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? It's good. It's good.
Yeah. Send it to everybody. Do it.
Test it. So this is the rule, okay? Just these birds at the end of the turn, you can just move them up off the board. Oh, that's a great idea. That'd be really cool. We're doing that with the mechanic, and that's like the end of the development process. That rule specifically, or that stratagem. Yeah. And then they go, because it sounds cool, right?
Yep.
But then like, you get a competitive AdMech player reading that and going, wait a second, that means I can end of the turn? What does that what does that mean? Oh, I can do all my secondaries, I can do like my actions, I can complete a whole bunch of stuff and then disappear, and then I can come in that turn, do that, and then disappear, so you can't physically interact with me?
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Games Workshop.
Thank you, Raw. Thank you, Raw. I really appreciate this so much. Now,
exactly.
Now, that brings up a good question is, you have something like that. Now, there are people that bought those sterilizers specifically for, doing that type of interaction.
Yeah.
What do you do after that is no longer a thing, right?
Serves you right.
I mean,
you paint them and get them ready for apocalypse matches.
Like, do you still keep them in the meta?
Unit? The thing is, you have to like take a step back. That unit is not like, it's not a bad unit.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can still get points off of it.
It just means your opponent can actually deal with the unit. You don't have like an invulnerable unit anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for people that see these nerfs that come in for their armies, and you're going to be seeing them like a lot as your new codexes come out, and then you have your chapter approved points coming in and everything like that. How do you transition yourself into understanding that eventually these models that you have are no longer going to be good in a competitive sense? Like, how do you deal with that, Scar, besides just buying the entire army? Like every model in the army.
Every model.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I've been playing Dark Eldar for the last 20 years or 15 years or something like that. I own every model in the army. So my army's very edition or meta proof because I literally can just pick and choose what is good at that point in time, and I don't have to go and spend more money, or maybe I need to like add another vehicle or two here or there. But a lot of the times you need to look at the thing that stays the most consistent throughout an edition. Mm-hmm. And sort of adapt to that specific thing. So a lot of the times what stays the most consistent are like the missions or the way you score points, that sort of thing. Yeah. So instead of like focusing specifically on like what composition my army is going to do and then play my list based on that composition, you look at how do I need to play the game to score points? And if my goal is to win by scoring points, how can I stop my opponent from scoring points and win with scoring more points? So a lot of the times the list you might build, depending on like how the meta is at the time, will change, and it's a lot easier to build to the mission than having to build to like your unit strengths and weaknesses in a pinch.
Yeah, I can feel that.
How do you feel about it?
The same term? Well, like for Death Guard, I mean, like I kind of. Death Guard just feels like they're in such a good spot right now. I feel like it's one of the only codexes that codex creep, as we've talked before, hasn't really affected it. And every unit still feels like it serves a purpose for that army, right? The only unit that like I feel like meta wise doesn't fit is actually the Plague Marine. Like everything else has a place. The Plague Marine's kind of like you don't really need to take a Plague Marine, right?
Mm-hmm. So take Poxwalkers instead.
Yeah, just take Poxwalkers instead with a bunch of Death Shroud Terminators. Have a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and and with every codex, like, and throughout the edition, there are going to be hits and misses.
Yeah,
like you're going to have a unit that you really love that's really iconic for that faction that you love, like the Plague Marine. Like you can't really talk Death Guard without being like the iconic Plague Marine, right? Mm-hmm. However, you're right. Sometimes that Plague Marine is like, well, even though it's the poster child for that faction, it doesn't really fit into this faction right now.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's either too expensive or other units in the codex outshine it rules-wise.
Yep.
And that's another thing that you have to keep in mind is don't be too attached. If you want to play and keep up with the meta, like competitively speaking, you can't be too attached to what you think is cool.
Yeah, and it's a really sad realization when you come to grips with that. Like there's a very big difference between playing the game competitively and playing the game casually, right? Yes. When you're playing the game casually, you can literally just throw whatever you want on the board and it's fine. You're playing...
Make up rules if you want.
Yeah,
literally. Yeah. It's set up that you could literally just make up rules and play whatever you want.
Bring 2 Vindicators. Why not?
Yeah, why not? Why not? It's fine. Like that, and then it's fine. And then you can play Apocalypse and just play with all your cool models. But then when you're looking at a competitive aspect and when you're going to like different tournaments, you're going to different events, right? You have to be able to understand that not every unit that you have, like the unit that you think is cool, can't really perform competitively, right? I mean, like, look at a Carnifex, right? Like, that's like a Tyrannid. That's like one of the biggest Tyrannid iconic models is a Carnifex. Absolute garbage.
Yep.
Can't run them. But, you have to understand. But just because you can't run them doesn't mean that the army's bad or anything. You just have to kind of adapt. You know, you have to adapt to what the meta is, and kind of like I feel like, and Scar, you can elaborate on this more. I feel like that the best way to kind of make sure that you're future proofing yourself is not by looking at what lists are really good at the time for your specific army, but looking at how you can play your army in your own style that counteracts how other people are playing the top tier armies.
Yep.
You're right. Like, and it's The thing is, this is such a broad topic because it branches out into more than just like, do you want to prepare for a shifting meta? You have to have a mentality that sort of like doesn't necessarily agree with change, right? Because nobody likes to be changed, but we all like thrive with change, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? Like we grow and we develop. So, you need to have the mentality of accepting that things are going to change and being flexible, right? In terms of like list building, if keeping your fingers in the meta, like using best coast pairings, taking a look at like the top list that people are playing, and then going back to your personal codex or your collection even, and going, what sort of units could I bring that could fill a gap in this list or deal with a specific unit that I'm seeing is popping up in the meta more frequently right now? And a lot of the times you'll be surprised. Like you'll reread your codex and read like a relic or a stratagem or a unit ability, and you'll kind of do a double take and be like, that would actually be really useful in a very specific situation that's happening in the meta right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's so it's about looking at what you have with a fresh mindset and a framework based on like what you're seeing is happening or a game you've had, and being adaptable and being like, ooh, cool, that'd be cool. Everybody's playing Psychers. I have this one relic that's anti-Psyker that nobody ever uses, but it's actually really cool considering now everybody's running Psychers, right?
Oh,
so like.
Mortal Wounds are a thing. Let me just pull out my Black Templars real quick.
Before I knew Death Guard, what was the Psyker?
Exactly.
What did you want to plug into there?
So, well, it's like he was saying, you're going back and you're digging through the codex, and we kind of like talked about this after the match on Saturday between me, you, and Bricky, right? Where I feel like some of the Space Marine players right now are the ones that have their codices or codexes, however you want to say it. They're like, oh, my army's in a bad spot. Like, oh, Blood Angels is in a bad spot. But I feel like most of the time they're so focused on their supplement specific units inside that they kind of forget, well, you have a whole nother codex with all these units that still get all your buffs. They just don't get those specific buffs that those other units get that you can probably use in your army that would actually help and benefit, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of Space Marine players are just like tunnel visioned into their supplement, and they're not actually looking at the Space Marine Codex itself and the units in there and like how to incorporate those units into their army and also be effective. Like Hellblasters would be great for Dark Angels, especially with the stratagem where they deal more damage with plasma weapons, right? So like it's stuff like that I just feel like people are just tunnel visioned into the supplement, and they just see that one particular unit that they want to make work, but it just doesn't fit with the meta.
Yeah. What's actually pretty interesting about like this topic is that, and a lot of actually the ways that you play 40K, especially competitively, a lot of the topics, it's not about like, this is a plug and play. You pick this unit, you win. Easy, done, right? A lot of it actually has to do with changing your mindset of how you look at the games, right? And I think that's like a huge part in competitive 40K that not a lot of people really understand, is that the game is there's so much of the game out there, right? There's so much knowledge that you can gain about this game. There's so many ins and outs. There's so much crazy stuff. Even now, people are still figuring out busted ways that you could play certain units, busted ways that you could play certain armies. But it's not like when you look at playing the game competitively, it's not about what's the best unit, what's the best army. I will now replicate that list and bring it to a tournament. That's not the point of competitive 40K. It's about like changing your mindset to become more adaptable and understanding what your weakness is and what your strengths are with whatever army that you're playing. I mean, like, look at someone like Richard Siegler. He can literally pick up any army and win a tournament, get like top 4, right? Like, it doesn't matter what army you're playing. If you play at such a high level and you are actually good, you don't have to land on this crutch of like, what's the strongest army, right? And I think that coincides with like people who think about switching up their armies as much as possible. Now, Scary, being a pro player, how do you feel about people that switch up their armies as much as possible, depending on if they're strong or not?
So in the how do I feel? I feel conflicted, to be honest. Because a lot of the times, people come and ask for advice or whatever, and they're like, "Hey, I really want to like learn how to play a game, or I really want to learn like how to play this faction or whatever." And then like they play one game, they lose, they change their list, they play another game, they lose. They go and go, "Ooh, okay, so Richard Siegler won this tournament with Tau, so I'm gonna like replicate his list and hope that I win," and then they lose, and then they get disappointed, right, and stuff like that. Now, I'll tell you right now that, like with any scientific process, if you want to do an experiment, you need to have a control group that it doesn't get touched, right? It's a control group. You know what's going to happen with a control group, right? And then in order to do an experiment, you take a sort of like a copy of the control group and you expose it to variables. And based on those variables, the control group will react, right? So then based on that information, you can make like an educated guess that this control group, when exposed to this variable, will more than likely do this, right? Now in 40K, we're playing a game with thousands of variables. There's dice rolls, right? That alone, right?
Yeah.
But you have the dice. Yes, okay. Like I say, don't blame the dice, but however, the dice have an impact in the game. Yes, they do. Terrain has an impact. The mission you're playing, your opponent's faction. Not only that, but the mood that you're in. That has an impact on how you approach the game at a competitive high level.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have to be in the zone, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you can have something that's affecting you that way. So all of these variables will affect the outcome of your game. One of the only things that you can keep consistent as a control group is the list that you play. Because in a game with so many variables, that's one of the only things you can truly control. Which is one of the reasons why you see people do well that play either a very similar list for like a year, right? Like Richard Siegler, like in 2018, went on a tear in the ITC season with his Triptide Tau.
Yeah.
Right? But he'd been playing that same style of list for like 2 years. Like over and over and over, and just doing consistently well. And then eventually he got to the point where he kind of cracked the code and just crushed people. But he kind of kept his list very, very similar throughout that whole period.
Yeah.
Right. So I have mixed feelings. It's good to test and find things and try like adapt to the meta. But if you just constantly change your list, you're never going to find consistent results, regardless of the variables or the missions or the meta, good or bad or whatever that is thrown at you.
Yeah. What about you, Demeki?
Well, one thing that I think is kind of interesting is especially like the Australian meta and stuff, really reading about and listening about that before COVID, is that a lot of the guys have so many armies so that they don't like people don't build against them, right? So that they're not bringing the same list to a tournament or an event, and that way I guess their opponents aren't building against them essentially to beat that list. That's why I know some people switch it up, especially with factions in their list. I agree with Scary though, and the Richard Siegler thing, because like lately I've been pretty much running the same Death Guard list in the league, and it's been performing really well, and I've just been making small tweaks to the list, and it's been working. Maybe one day I'll crack the code. Maybe I'll go full Rain Man.
Yeah. Man, who would have thought that practice makes perfect? Guys?
I know, right?
Man,
Not just practice makes perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect.
Exactly.
If you're practicing something shitty, then you're going to have like the bad results,
Yeah.
right? Like you want to
yeah.
make sure that you're practicing properly with the right mentality, or all that practice is just going into learning how to do something wrong really well.
Yeah.
And I think
honestly, it's like what happens with video games,
Yeah.
right? People get into this idea that they're going to go into a game and it's going to be the exact same result from their last game, right? You look at this, it's the same thing with things like battle royales, with any MOBAs that you're playing or anything like that. You go into a game and you see that you can control your character, right? Think of the character as your army for 40K. You can control it, and everything that you do with that army, it's all on you, right?
Yeah.
And then, like you take what Scar said, with all these different variables, you're going up against different people. You're in a different environment. It's a different time of day. You know, you have all these variables coming in to play your game, right? But when you're just going on autopilot, you know, you show up to your LGS and you bring in your armies, and you're just like, this is the same strategy that I've been doing, where I'm just gonna put everything on the line and then just push them up and then, you know, hope for the best, right? Like, that's not really practicing. That's kind of just going with the flow, like just going through the motions and not really tactically analyzing how you're playing, right?
And it's about positioning. It's about, it's about, putting the right amount of dice or right amount of things into killing or destroying something. And I wanted to kind of, make a note there, Demeki, where, like, yes, like certain pro players, quote unquote, like, for example, like John Lennon, right? He'll go to a random tournament and take like this list, and then he'll go to a different one and take that list. And then, like, down in Australia, you'll have other people taking weird lists that they change frequently. Yeah. One of the things that a pro player does is they'll have played that list. Even if it's from one week to another, they'll probably play that list like 6 to 7 times that week before they go to the event. Behind the scenes, right? Like, they've tested this list, even though it doesn't seem like it, right? Or it's very similar to another list in concept and in sort of like unit roles. Yeah. You know, because if you look at a list that, say, like John Lennon's great example, he took an Ultramarine list to a tournament, does really well, then takes a Deathwatch list to a tournament, but it's very, very, very similar to the concepts that he built and included in his Ultramarine list.
Yeah. It's the same thing. Yeah. It's just trying out different ways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the one thing that you bring up too, though, when you were talking about video games and whatnot, I think one thing that people tend to forget too is, like, when you lose, right, or die in a video game, like, you think back as to what went wrong, right? And then reflect and say, well, what could I have done differently? Like today, I was playing Escape from Tarkov, and I pushed someone, and they had the better position, and I decided that I was going to hip fire instead of aim down sight. And it cost me my life in the game. Yeah. and immediately, like, as soon as it happened, I was like, I should have aimed down sight. Why didn't I aim down sight? And it's just stuff like this that, like, you can do the same thing in this game. Like, why did I put my guys right here? They just got shot off the board. Like, why didn't I put them over here behind this piece of terrain? Why didn't I set them up for success? Right. So I think a lot of people don't self-reflect sometimes, and I know it can be hard because it's the heat of the moment, right? Yeah. So, but yeah,
not only heat of the moment, but people find scapegoats. Yeah. Right, because they don't want to take responsibility that you could have done something wrong, and it's like a little harsh for me to say, like, but in reality, somebody who just blames the dice or only blames the fact that their codex doesn't have a new codex, right, seems to be putting a lot of blame on stuff that they have no control over. And if you put blame on things you don't have control over in a shifting meta, you're literally taking the power away from yourself and not being able to sort of, like, do anything about it, right? You're not giving yourself agency or the power to really tackle the problem.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like bringing it back to, like, with AdMech, you know, you have your sterilizers that just got nerfed, and then there's probably going to be people out there that's just like, oh, dang it, man. Like, what the heck? Like, it was so good. What do you mean it's nerfed now? Darn. Like, you know, there's going to be people like that. And then they're going to be saying, like, oh, well, now the army isn't as broken. It's not as good anymore. But that's not true. You still have your chicken walkers. You still have your las cannons, you know. You still have so much stuff that you can use in a meta that's just constantly changing all the time. I mean, like, what? Every month now, there's like a new FA. No, not a new FAQ. Yeah, there's like a new FAQ. I think every month this year, has there been a new FAQ?
Usually, an FAQ for a book
Maybe, yeah.
comes out 2 to 3 weeks after the book is released.
Yeah.
And then they did like the point values and the GT mission pack, and they kind of released FAQs in conjunction with that.
Yeah, but the GT mission pack was kind of like the same mission pack. So
Yeah.
it's like-
Yeah, I mean, all the missions at least.
Yeah.
It was. They really didn't change like anything.
Yeah.
Which it was a bit of a wow moment, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, GW now, don't even get me started on GW like 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's just, back then you had a busted codex like AdMech, right? It would have been like 4 years.
Yeah.
Of
Before you
busted
get a new
AdMech
one.
codexes
Yeah.
where you would go to a tournament and like 80% of people would have been playing AdMech. You know what I mean? Like, it was, it's nuts.
Yeah. And like now that the game is like constantly having more and more updates, more so than what people are like complaining about. No, there's a lot of people that say that the game doesn't get updated a lot, but I think that it does.
Mm-hmm.
Especially now with new codexes coming out. Like, we're still getting new codexes almost like every single month, which is nice comparatively to the horror stories that I've heard. And like,
Oh, yeah. You used to have to wait like almost a year.
Yeah, exactly
years.
what Scary was saying, right?
Yeah.
So you have all these changes, but like, how would you guys recommend these changes in the sense of like buying your models, right? So like you can have, and I'm not saying to purchase every single model in the army unless you have the funds to do so and you want to, and have at it. But what's a good way for you to kind of like be ready on the dime when something is good to put it into your army if it fits your play style when it's all of a sudden good now? You know what I mean?
I think one thing is to look at a unit and say, what is this going to score me on secondaries? I think that's one way to look at it. Like, what is this going to do for me in the game?
No, I'm saying like, let's say that you have an 8th edition codex, right? And you're going to be transitioning into 9th edition, right? With your 9th edition codex.
Yeah.
How do you physically prepare for that, right? Like, how do you get ready for that? Like, Scary, I know that you have the entire like Drukhari lineup, right? You have like all the models in the army, but let's say that you didn't have all the models in your army. How would you have been prepared from 8th edition to 9th edition to hit the ground running to be able to go to your next event?
So one of the things I started doing was I started playing with more varied lists leading up to the codex change.
Mm-hmm.
So I started like experimenting with a bunch of different models and units just to get a feel for them, and a lot of the times like we live in an edition or in an age where you can, do stuff on, for example, like Tabletop Simulator, for example, right? So like access to models and stuff, you can practice and things or see if that's something that you want to get, right? Staying on top of like the rumor boards or whatever, you can kind of like get an idea of what people think is going to be good or bad. But to be honest, I think that's sort of like the wild factor when it comes to building a list. You know what I mean? Like if you can't really go out and pre-buy a bunch of stuff to prepare, quote unquote, for the meta, because you might go out and go, you know what, this it's like, let's call it Jar Jar Binks syndrome, right? Jar Jar Binks is going to be the best character in all of Star Wars, get a tattoo down your back or whatever, and then they're not, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of have to like wing it in a way, and I feel like it's more like look at your play style and go, what's fast, what's tanky, what's killy, like now, right? And then kind of go, what sort of suits my play style? I might want another unit of fast moving stuff because I like a fast moving army, or I might need another tanky like HP unit that can just sit there and take hits.
Yeah, and you kind of
because that's my play style, right? So you can kind of invest on that, and then you kind of gamble at that point.
Yeah.
Like, I hope they're good, that sort of thing.
Yeah, you kind of look at the model and you're just like, this guy looks tanky. Maybe in the next codex he'll be tanky. I'll pick him up. Maybe. Let's see. What about you, Demeki? Like, how do you deal with having? Because you went from all of your armies went from an 8th edition to a 9th edition codex now.
Yeah,
so
well, I mean, like
some
of them. So like Death Guard, I don't even think did I get an 8th edition game in with Death Guard before 9th?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the tournament.
Yeah,
dude, I completely forgot. But to honestly, God, the army plays completely different. It feels like like it's the same, but like a lot of changes. Like units that were good are no longer good. Like the guy that has the bell, I forgot his name already. The Blightbringer.
Yeah.
in 8th edition, he was amazing because you would roll an extra dice for an advance. And now it's just +1 to your advance. So, like, now for what his cost is, it's just like, well, why am I going to bring him? He's not that great. I can just bring more Foul Blightspawn.
Yeah, but then you ran into the problem where, like, now, and this is like something that you another thing that you can't really control is what, like, you know, you see your new codex, right? You get it, and you don't have the models, and then you go online to find the models,
and they're not there.
And guess what? They're all sold out. So, like, do you guys, like, prepare before your 9th edition codex drops? Like, do you guys try to purchase more models and have like a reservoir of models ready for you for when your 9th edition codex comes out, or when a new update is coming out that you think is going to be really, really big?
I think one thing that I was doing as a new player was just kind of like grabbing like almost one of each, just to be like, oh, maybe I can just give these a try, and then if I like the way that they play, then I'll buy more, right? And maybe go to the rule of 3. And I mean, it's still kind of that way, but now, like, certain things I will buy 3 of. Like, I saw Playburst crawlers. I wanted 3 of them because they look cool. And that's the cool factor. That's not even the knowledge of like how they're used or played in the game.
Yeah.
But
where are your defilers?
Yeah.
What about that, huh?
Every time that I try to buy one, they're sold out. So like, I mean, and then that comes down to, well, if I really want to play test or use a defiler, maybe reach out to someone. But if I'm going to play test it to see if it fits on my list, then, you know, I'm going to use the tools that I have available, either by proxying or playing on TTS.
What about you, Scary?
Another thing to keep in mind is in terms of, like, and to tackle the tackling the changing meta with, like, fluctuating, like, you know, stock supply, basically. Go out of your way to find the little stores in the middle of nowhere.
Yes, the little local mom and pop
shops.
The
little local mom and pop game shops that have been carrying Warhammer for like 10, 20 years or 30 years or whatever, that are literally in like the little towns in your surrounding area. Because a lot of the times they will have stock of stuff that's very popular that they just don't have the traffic at their store. Yes. So I have found many a quote unquote sold out mega box, right, at a little like hole in the wall shop, because they got like 10 of them and they were never able to sell them.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and that's something. And of course, you know, especially with like these times, you know, like it's good to find little shops and support them and keep them around and stuff like that. But I mean, that's like, it's more of like a fringe way of doing it, but that's, you know, yeah. Or wait till the next code comes out, and then just be patient. Wait for, like, if you needed racks with liquefier guns, now's your time to buy them on eBay, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, it literally was a fad for like 2 months, and then it got FAQ'd or burnt out, and maybe you want to use them now, right? Or you just need racks, so then you can buy them off people who are just unloading them because they want to buy AdMech now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you kind of prey on the people that are switching armies all the time.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of like preying on them, being like, hey, you know, these guys aren't good anymore. You want to hand them over to me?
You want to hand them over?
Want to hand them over? Because, like, because I know that there are times when, like, you feel bad when you can't get a model that you really want. Like, I remember when the Armored Imperium came out, or the Armored Compendium.
Yeah, Armored Imperial.
The Forge World book.
Yeah, the Forge World book. When the
Forge World book came out, I remember when it came out, we got it, and then, like, obviously we got it like what, a week late because of GW, right? So then you open up the book, and then, you know, I saw like Dimas, right? And I saw what, like, the Hierodules, and I was like, oh my god, these things are so cheap. You look at the Heritage, it's like, oh my god, they're so cheap. I can run them now. Like, these, and like their profiles are great. I want to get them. The day that you finally see everything, and then you go online in order to buy it, and it's just like, all sold out, and then you don't get them for like 3-4 months, and then like you start seeing everybody like, oh yeah, the Dima's really good, guys. It's really, really, and then you kind of feel bad because you can't get access to it because you didn't have access to the stock, which obviously, like, maybe it was because of COVID times. Yeah. So, like, you know, it's not as available, right?
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure, like, Scary, has that issue ever happened to you at all?
Yeah, especially when I wanted to use like mandrakes, like InQI mandrakes. There was some like key units that I was really excited about adding some more into my list, and they've just been sold out, right? Like hard to get, or like Reaver jet bikes and Hellions.
Yeah.
Like I walked into a little local game shop that doesn't have a lot of foot traffic, and there was a box of Hellions. I was like, snag. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like I was able to get myself a Gangs of Kamara box, right?
Yeah.
For like, there's six Reaver jet bikes and 10 Hellions in that box. Amazing, right? Like it was, little finds like that. Yeah, so I have found stuff like that. Of course, at the same time, as a hobbyist at heart, I always recommend like give yourself a chance at potentially like converting some models. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Getting into using green stuff and bits from the bits box.
3D printing some stuff.
Kit bashing stuff.
Yeah, like there's
right?
lots of different ways
Like,
you can do it.
There's different ways to do it, and a lot of times the rule of cool will apply, even in like a tournament. Like if you put the effort into making a Dima out of a Trigon and a Carnifex and some green stuff, and you kind of made it the same shape. It might not be the same thing, but be like, hey, Mr. Tournament Organizer, like I can't, like you might not fly like a big event, right? But you could be like, I can't buy a Dima. I'd like to try it. It's the right base. It's the right size. It's, it's like I've measured it or whatever. I kind of use this as a Dima. I've converted it and I painted it and it doesn't look like shit.
Yeah.
So, and then a lot of times people will be like, yeah, sure. You put the effort into it. And then you can kind of use that as like a stand-in until you can get the actual model.
Yeah, almost like
a proxy,
a glorified proxy almost. Yeah.
As long as there's like work and effort, like you're not putting a pop can on the table and being like, this is a Dima. Like you put some heart and soul into it.
You're not putting a freaking a Coca-Cola on the table and being like, hey guys, Morty.
I'm glad you're happy though about the Forge World book, because I remember looking through it and I was like, everything got worse.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like it's the same thing that people are running into now. You know, like with the topic of this podcast, talking about like an ever changing meta with things like Contemptors with Volkite.
Yep.
Right. Everybody wants it. It's like what Volkite. The Volkite guns, you can't find them anywhere, and people are trying to find different ways to like.
I have
build
the bodies.
Yeah. People have the
guns.
bodies, but they don't have the guns. But everybody wants to run it. Like at that point, when you see something like that, how do you guys feel? Like, do you guys think that you should keep trying to chase those things and then do the 3D printing, or like, well, obviously, if you go to a GW World, you can't do that anymore. But like, if you go to like kit bashing or anything like that, in order to get those weapons and stuff, like, do you still go for that, or do you ditch it and try to come up with like your own way to play against that meta? But like, I guess like the Contemptor kind of fills in a different aspect for that army, like it actually fills in a void. But yeah, like how do you deal with something like that when it's just not going to be available anytime soon, and you feel like that's going to get points increased or changed or eroded in some way in the near future?
Try to find the next best thing, or it's like the Contemptors. Like I have the Contemptors and I have the Volkite arms because everybody's trying to do it. It's part of a meta. But that particular meta doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to play it. It's cool. I mean, I like it. The Contemptors are a sick model. Since I can't get my hands on the Volkite arms, then my options are to like 3D print it or find some, kit bash it, whatever. But like, am I going to stop? No. Because like, even if they do something and it makes the Volkites worse or not as good, then I can just file the model away, right? Until something else, until like either I find another way that model can work, or I use it for another game style, right? A different type of game. Like I don't like every model that I purchase with the intent of use, or with the intent of use sometime down the line. Like maybe not as like my meta, but like maybe, I mean, because for what we do, like we're not always trying to do meta right. We're doing fluff lists and stuff all the time. But like when it comes to me going to a tournament, if I have a model that's not like that's not going to fit a meta for a tournament, yeah, I won't run it, but like, or I may not run it, but like I'm not going to sell the model. I'll keep it.
Yeah. What about you, Scary?
I think as hobbyists, we're very creative individuals, so we will find a way. If we really want a model to put into our list, we find a way.
Yeah.
Now, it's sort of like this is a point where the community sort of ends up splitting. You have people who are very, very competitive, like meta chasers, and they will pay top dollar for pieces they need. They'll go out of their way. They'll trade. They'll beg. They'll like recast. They'll whatever it is they need to. Like, and I'm talking like back in the day when you needed like 20 rocket launchers for your Space Wolves, you literally built your own like mold and like cast like 100 rocket launches at home, right? Like for yourself and for your army. Like that was so we're creative in that way, and we'll find a way. But the hobbyist might wait. They'll be like, "Well, wait till it's in stock, and I'll just get it." Or you're on a Forge World waiting list or whatever. You know, I for one, I believe if you want to play a game, you support the people who make the game so they continue to make cool stuff. Like number one, but number two, I'm not against like kit bashing with different bits. So if like you need like a resin bit or whatever,